Daily Words of God.
During the last days, God has come chiefly in order to speak His words. He speaks from the perspective of the Spirit, from the perspective of man, and from the perspective of the third person. He speaks in different ways, using one way for a period of time, and uses the ways of speaking to change the conceptions of man and remove the image of the vague God from man's heart. This is the main work done by God. Because man believes that God has come to heal, to cast out demons, to perform miracles, and to bestow material blessings upon man, God carries out this stage of work, the work of chastisement and judgment, in order to remove such things from the conceptions of man, so that man may know the reality and normality of God, and so that the image of Jesus may be removed from his heart and replaced by a new image of God. As soon as the image of God within man becomes old, then it becomes an idol. When Jesus came and carried out that stage of work, He did not represent the entirety of God. He performed some signs and wonders, spoke some words, and was ultimately crucified, and He represented one part of God. He could not represent all that is of God, but represented God in doing one part of God's work. That is because God is so great and so wondrous and is unfathomable, and because God only does one part of His work in every age. The work done by God during this age is chiefly the provision of the words for the life of man, the disclosure of the substance of the nature of man and the corrupt disposition of man, the elimination of religious conceptions, futile thinking, outdated thinking, as well as the knowledge and culture of man. This must all be laid bare and cleansed away through the words of God. In the last days, God uses words and not signs and wonders to make man perfect. He uses His words to expose man, to judge man, to chastise man, and to make man perfect, so that in the words of God, man comes to see the wisdom and loveliness of God, and comes to understand the disposition of God, so that through the words of God, man beholds the deeds of God. During the age of law, Jehovah led Moses out of Egypt with His words, and spoke some words to the Israelites. At that time, part of the deeds of God were made plain, but because the caliber of man was limited, and nothing could make his knowledge complete, God continued to speak and work. In the age of grace, man once more saw part of the deeds of God. Jesus was able to show signs and wonders, to heal and cast out demons, and be crucified, 3 days after which He was resurrected and appeared in the flesh before man. Of God, man knew no more than this. Man knows as much as is shown to him by God. And if God were to show nothing more to man, then such would be the extent of man's delimitation of God. Thus, God continues to work, so that man's knowledge of Him may become deeper, and so that he may gradually come to know the substance of God. God uses His words to make man perfect. Your corrupt disposition is disclosed by the words of God, and your religious conceptions are replaced by the reality of God. God incarnate of the last days has chiefly come to fulfill the words that the Word becomes flesh, the Word comes into the flesh, and the Word appears in the flesh. And if you do not have a thorough knowledge of this, then you will still be unable to stand fast. During the last days, God primarily intends to accomplish a stage of work in which the Word appears in the flesh, and this is one part of God's management plan. Thus, your knowledge must be clear. Regardless of how God works, God does not allow man to delimit him. If God did not do this work during the last days, then man's knowledge of him could go no further. You would only know that God can be crucified and can destroy Sodom, and that Jesus can be raised from the dead and appear to Peter. But you would never say that God's words can accomplish all and can conquer man. Only through experiencing God's words can you speak of such knowledge. And the more of God's work that you experience, the more thorough your knowledge of Him will become. Only then will you cease to delimit God within your own conceptions. Man comes to know God by experiencing His work, and there is no other correct way to know God.